I'm generally not very observant. I tend to miss even significant changes, let alone small details. Being a private investigator would definitely not be my forte. That's why it surprised me when, on a particular Wednesday in April, I noticed something about my wife, Alicia, when she returned home from work. I vividly recall she was wearing a white collared shirt that struck me as more masculine than feminine. What caught my attention was an unusual streak of bright red on her collar, resembling lipstick. I further surprised myself by noting that the lipstick wasn't her usual dark red shade, it was much brighter. Moreover, I observed her lips had a mix of the new bright color and her usual darker shade, somewhat smeared. Feeling unusually observant that day, I decided to playfully tease her. "Honey, if I were your husband and you were my wife, I'd be concerned about that lipstick on your collar. Looks like you found yourself another woman," I joked. Alicia checked her collar in the mirror, appearing flustered. It must have been from one of my colleagues at work. "We hug each other often, it probably happened then," she explained. Although I believed her, I kept up the teasing. "Do you kiss them too when you hug?" I asked with a smirk. "Of course not." "Why would you even ask that?" she responded. My banter seemed to be working well, so I pointed out the different lipstick colors on her lips and the smudges. Checking herself in the mirror, Alicia sighed, "Frank, when did you become so observant?" Expecting a witty comeback, I was surprised when she instead trembled and muttered, "I was hoping to avoid this. I know my explanation might not satisfy you, but it's really nothing. It won't affect us. I hope you can accept that and we can move on." Her response left me wondering how this newfound observation would change our lives, although at that moment I had no inkling of what was to come. I was completely taken aback. My comments weren't intended to accuse her of anything, but her reaction assumed otherwise. Her response pushed me from being observant to concerned, and then suspicious. Things suddenly became very serious. "Who was it, Alicia? Who did you allow to kiss you? Was that bright red lipstick a gift from him? How many times did you kiss him? What else did you do with him?" Alicia replied, "Frank, there was no him. It was Ramona and me. The bright red lipstick belongs to her. What we've done shouldn't endanger either of our marriages. It doesn't have to affect us at all." Questions flooded my mind and then spilled out of my mouth. "You and Ramona? When did you reconnect with her? I thought you ended things after she got together with your ex, David Jefferson. This goes far beyond friendly. Are you saying you two are having an affair? Are you both lesbians?" Alicia reminded me that Ramona was her college best friend and roommate for all 4 years. During the first 2 years, Alicia and David were together until I came along. Alicia broke up with David and started dating me. She admitted she was surprised when Ramona got back together with David, but she said, "I didn't really care. I was with you. Remember, we went to their wedding and they came to ours. We're two friendly couples. It just so happens the women are more than friends. It's more than friendship, but nowadays, it's not considered lesbian by us, for sure." I acknowledged the history but pressed for clarity. "What exactly is happening between you and Ramona? If it's not an affair, then what is it?" She assured me she wasn't in love with Ramona. She explained it was a recent rekindling of an old experimental relationship from college, just fooling around, nothing serious or long-term. She described it as purely sexual enjoyment, reminiscing that they called it being AC/DC back then, able to swing both ways. She emphasized they never stopped dating boys, they just occasionally enjoyed some girl-on-girl fun. Alicia described this revival as harmless fun that meant nothing to either of them and posed no threat to me or David. I asked how it started again. She said, "One day, Ramona was having a rough day at work. We met for lunch in the park. I kissed her to cheer her up, and it escalated from there, happening a few times." "So, you initiated it," I remarked. "I guess so, but it was mutual," she replied. "And does David know about his wife's involvement with you?" "Yes, he does, and he's fine with it. He knows Ramona won't leave him for me. He's not worried because what we do can't lead to a child," she explained. "Are you implying he's right and I'm wrong?" Do you think I'm out of touch with the modern world? Should I accept your relationship with Ramona like David has? She explained to me that it wasn't a lesbian relationship because lesbians are exclusively attracted to women, whereas both she and Ramona could be attracted to both men and women. She emphasized that their intimacy didn't compromise their commitment to their spouses. You've got to be kidding me, Alicia. You want me to overlook the fact that you've been sexually involved with someone else? Legally or morally, it's devastating to me. Is it adultery? Maybe not, but it feels like an emotional affair. An affair is an affair. Does it hurt less because it involves two women? Maybe to some, but it still hurts David and me. She then laid it out plainly. If you tell me my actions threaten our marriage and ask me to stop seeing Ramona, I'll end it right now. Just say stop, and it's over. What I have with Ramona doesn't mean that much to me. If you tell me to stop, it will be over. I responded, all right, I'm telling you to stop, but it doesn't erase what's already happened. Agreeing to stop now doesn't absolve the past. I can't undo what's been done, but from now on, starting today, I'll never be with Ramona or anyone else sexually. I promise to be faithful to you, emotionally and physically. But even if you keep that promise, it doesn't change what's already happened. I can only hope for your forgiveness for what's happened. It's not like being with another man. I hope you understand that. I was deeply conflicted. One day of being observant had turned my world upside down. At least she was honest with me, wasn't she? Chapter 2. I was still reeling from Alicia's actions. I felt the need to speak with David, hoping to gain insight into the extent of Alicia's betrayal. I invited him to lunch, and he agreed. After some obligatory small talk, our conversation turned to the situation between our wives. Not much new information emerged until he dropped a bombshell. You watched them? Were they okay with that? Where did it happen? He explained that the initial encounters occurred in Alicia's car at Big Forest Park. When they started meeting at our house on Wednesday afternoons, I could watch. I think my excitement matched theirs. I was utterly shocked. While his wife was involved in a betrayal, he was an enthusiastic spectator. At the first opportunity, I informed Alicia that David had disclosed to me that he had watched her and Ramona together. Her immediate reaction was, "Oh my God. Are you still digging for more information even after I've ended things?" She admitted that David had occasionally watched their encounters. I questioned if he had participated. She explained that David seemed aroused by their activities and she had seen him masturbating in his chair several times. That was the extent of his involvement. Well, at least her account matched David's. She hadn't lied about it. Once again, she was being truthful, wasn't she? Things started to calm down after that. The following Wednesday, Alicia came home without any trace of bright red lipstick or smudges. Life seemed to be returning to normal, but I remained cautious. Reflecting back, I realized I had never asked Alicia a crucial question: how long had their fooling around been going on? I had assumed it was recent. I was wrong. My monthly trip to headquarters was approaching, meaning I would be away on Tuesday and Wednesday. I considered asking a friend to keep an eye on Alicia or even hiring a private investigator. While pondering this, I had a chance to glance at Alicia's digital day planner. She was updating it when a neighbor stopped by, and they engaged in a lengthy conversation at our door. Seizing the opportunity, I checked her entries for the days I would be away. There was no entry for Tuesday, but Wednesday had 2 entries. The first read, "Check with our ND." I assumed she meant Ramona and David. Ramona made sense, but why David? The second entry stated, "Empty suitcase and dispose." I had no clue what that meant. It seemed she planned to empty a suitcase and then get rid of it. This piqued my curiosity intensely. It was such an odd entry. Sometimes I wonder how different things would be if I hadn't pursued the suitcase entry. Life would undoubtedly be less complicated. After all, Alicia had stopped her indiscretions and returned to being the loving wife I cherished. Our marriage was healing, back on track. So why didn't I ignore that entry? I suppose my curiosity got the better of me regarding what empty suitcase and dispose could possibly mean. My curiosity drove me to action when Alicia and my sister went out on a shopping trip one Saturday afternoon. Chapter 3. I entered our closet and began inspecting each suitcase. One stood out. It was locked. The lock was small, a combination type with 4 numeric dials. I started trying numbers significant to us: Alicia's birth year, my birth year, our wedding year. It wasn't until I tried her age followed by mine that the suitcase clicked open. It could easily be described as the most pivotal moment of my entire life. The first thing that caught my eye was a container of spermicide. I had never seen Alicia use it before. Was she using it secretly when I wasn't around? We had always agreed to use condoms as our contraceptive method until we were ready to have children. Why the sudden change? It puzzled me deeply. My confusion only grew when I discovered a package of birth control pills. It was one of those monthly cards where each pill had been taken out of its slot. Every pill for March had been used, and I recognized Alicia's handwriting on the label. What was going on? Was she so afraid of pregnancy that she felt the need to use both spermicide and birth control pills? It seemed excessive. I found another identical card labeled April with a few rows of pills missing. At this point, I couldn't deny that Alicia was secretly using spermicide and taking birth control pills. I became increasingly perplexed with each new revelation. While her cautiousness about pregnancy was apparent, I began to suspect there was something more troubling beneath the surface. A nagging voice in my head suggested that Alicia's involvement with Ramona was more than just casual fooling around. It insinuated that David's passive role as a spectator was unlikely. I poured myself a strong drink and contemplated the implications. Ultimately, I decided to close the suitcase and return it to its place. I needed time to process what I had found and what it meant for the future of our marriage. As I went back to the suitcase, I noticed something else beneath a piece of underwear: 3 smaller cards labeled as pregnancy tests for December, January, and February. Each had instructions on how to interpret the results. I checked the December and January tests, both negative. But the February test? It was positive. My heart sank. Just a couple of months ago, Alicia had become pregnant. The room spun around me. I felt faint. She had been pregnant and had taken a pregnancy test after her January test came back negative. Who was the father? Was it possible it was mine and she hadn't told me? Shouldn't she be showing by now if it were mine? My mind wrestled with these questions, torn between hope and despair. When I gathered myself enough to continue searching, I made the most devastating discovery of all: 2 empty pill boxes at the very bottom of the suitcase, both prescribed to Alicia Anderson. One was for mifepristone, the other for misoprostol, medications used in combination to induce an abortion. The date on the bottles was February 21st. Overcoming my hesitation, I looked up these medicines online. They confirmed my worst fears. They were used together to terminate a pregnancy. I recalled that Alicia had been ill for a week in February, citing female problems. Now I understood what she meant, though she hadn't shared the full truth with me. I had no idea then that it would become my problem too. My heart desperately searched for a logical explanation for why Alicia would choose to abort our baby. There had to be a reason, a justification that eluded me at that moment. Meanwhile, the voice of doubt, the demon on my shoulder, insisted that Alicia had engaged in unprotected sex with another man starting around November or December of last year. That man, it asserted, was likely David Jefferson. If I allowed myself to believe what my mind and the demon were suggesting, everything started to make sense. Their affair must have begun without protection, and when Alicia attempted to prevent pregnancy with spermicide, it failed. By the time she discovered she was pregnant, it was too late for emergency contraception. Faced with a difficult decision, she must have felt that preserving our marriage meant terminating the pregnancy and keeping it a secret from me. The alternative would have devastated both marriages and caused irreparable harm. Somehow, she found someone willing to prescribe the medications needed for an abortion. Reluctantly, my heart had to acknowledge the evidence. My wife had terminated another man's baby in mid-February. As much as I resisted the realization, it all added up. The fooling around with Ramona likely started towards the end of last year. David's voyeurism and self-gratification followed soon after. As their passion escalated, what started as watching transformed into active involvement. Alicia, resorting to spermicide before each encounter, began using pregnancy tests to confirm its effectiveness. The positive result in February changed everything. Faced with two choices, claiming the baby was mine, a claim unlikely to withstand DNA testing, or terminating the pregnancy, she chose the latter. Against all odds, it succeeded. She aborted the baby right under my nose, and I remained completely oblivious. Little did I suspect that my wife had aborted a child conceived with David Jefferson while I naively accepted her explanation of female problems. The story could have ended there, but it didn't. After recovering from the abortion, their tryst resumed. The difference was that she switched from spermicide to birth control pills, hoping to avoid another unwanted pregnancy. The decision to resume their affair after such a traumatic event was morally indefensible. Their secret might have continued undiscovered if not for that fateful Wednesday when I noticed the lipstick on her collar. I had never been particularly observant before, but that one abnormal day changed everything. It was a Wednesday in mid-April when I playfully confronted her, and she assured me she would end things with Ramona. Coincidentally, the evidence from the suitcase showed she stopped taking birth control pills shortly after. I had assumed her affair with Ramona had only recently begun, but by then she had already been pregnant by Ramona's husband and had terminated the pregnancy. That was the harsh reality. Chapter 4. Now, I know what I must do. It won't be easy for either of us. What happened to Alicia? She had been the perfect wife until this affair began. Although she ended it, the damage was irreversible. In my eyes, she had chosen David Jefferson over me, despite her efforts to reconcile. I emptied the suitcase into a plastic bag, carefully relocked it, and returned it to its original place. Securing the bag of evidence in my electronic equipment workbench drawer, I ensured everything was safely preserved and inaccessible. Despite our usual practice of addressing issues promptly, this time I needed professional assistance. I arranged for my assistant to cover my monthly trip while I took compensatory time to consult with Frank Robinson, my attorney. Understanding the legal landscape in our state regarding adultery and divorce, I left Frank's office with a clear plan in mind. Armed with a draft of the divorce proposal and the evidence from the suitcase, I prepared for the confrontation. Placing all the incriminating items on our dining room table, I brewed coffee and waited for Alicia to return from work. When she walked in, I didn't greet her warmly as usual. She found me seated at the table with a cup of coffee, poured one for herself, and sat down opposite me. I began without preamble. When were you planning to tell me about your affair with David Jefferson? Her response was immediate and defensive. What are you talking about? Where did you get such an idea? What are you accusing me of? Silently, I took her hand and led her to the dining room where the evidence lay spread out on the table. As she comprehended what she was seeing, she broke down in tears. I had heard of people turning pale with fear or shock, but Alicia was the first person I saw actually go white. It was as if all the blood drained from her face. Worried she might collapse, I guided her into a chair, where she sat crying for several minutes. When she finally regained some composure, she whispered, "I made a huge mistake. I hope you can forgive me." I wanted to reply with a cutting remark, but instead, I said firmly, it wasn't a mistake, it was a betrayal. I pointed out the escalation from her affair with Ramona to involving David made it an unforgivable act of adultery. Through her tears, she pleaded, "Please don't say that, Frank," notably not denying my accusation about David. That was my cue. I confronted her, revealing the information from Ramona and the damning evidence from the suitcase. Slapping an envelope down on the table, I declared, "This is my divorce proposal. Have your lawyer review it and respond through mine." She sobbed, "Is there anything at all, that I can do? You know that I've already stopped everything. I'll do anything additional that you require. I have a lot of crow to eat and I'll make it my steady diet to get us past this and allow us to remain together." Desperate and clinging to hope, she tried to deflect blame by claiming David had drugged her every Wednesday. We always had a drink before we began our sexual activities. My drink was always spiked. Ramona will confirm that. Can't you see that I wasn't responsible for my actions? Don't be ridiculous, Alicia. Don't embarrass yourself with a fantasy like that, I retorted firmly. You don't want to know the truth. Listen to me, she pleaded. All right, let's play this silly game. Let me get this straight, Alicia. You're saying that you were drugged, so you didn't know that David was having sex with you? That's right. It wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been drugged. I always assumed it was just me and Ramona. I was oblivious to what David was doing to me. Are you saying that you didn't notice the evidence of what happened when you got home? You didn't see the evidence of his actions? I pressed. David and Ramona must have cleaned me up before I left. I didn't know. As I said, I thought it was just me and Ramona fooling around, she insisted. Did you think that Ramona could get you pregnant? I asked, incredulous. Of course not. I'm not that stupid, she replied defensively. How stupid do you think I am? If you didn't know you were having sex with David, why were you taking pregnancy tests on a regular basis? Also, why did you use the spermicide and take birth control pills? You are either completely brainless or a liar. Which are you, Alicia? I demanded, my frustration boiling over. She looked defeated as she said softly, all right, I'll admit that I wanted and enjoyed what David did to me, but I don't love him. I love you. I don't want him. I want you. That conversation solidified what the demon on my shoulder had been telling me all along. Any doubts from my heart had to be dismissed. I told her that it would take a miracle to restore what she had ruined. She dropped her head, trembling, and pleaded, just ask Ramona. She'll tell you that it was just sex. She knows that I still love you. She knows I don't love David. He is hers and you are mine. Let's forget all of this and start over. I will never disappoint you again. Then she added desperately, one more thing, we only got together 1 day a week. It was only for a few hours. The average was probably 2 hours. Those 2 hours were not taken from my time with you. I worked through my lunch period on Monday and Tuesday so I could extend my lunch period on Wednesday. A week is 168 hours. For 166 of them, I was your wife in every way. I never thought about David or Ramona during any of those 166 hours that I was only yours. Please don't condemn me for just 2 bad hours out of 168. A real affair would consume much more time than that. Tell me that you see that. I hear what you're saying, but it's not just about the hours. It's not even about the number of orgasms that you enjoyed during your affair. It's about one moment where you were impregnated. It's about another man fathering a child, I said, cutting through her attempt to justify her actions. I should have been the father of your first baby, but I wasn't. David Jefferson was the father of your first baby. The fact that you terminated the pregnancy doesn't change that reality. We can't rewind time and make me the father of your first child. That ship has sailed. I explained to her that she had also misunderstood both me and Ramona. I informed her that my attorney had a written statement from Ramona that revealed everything. Her statement makes it clear that she was willing to engage in fooling around with you. She wasn't happy about David watching, but she tolerated it. When he transitioned from watching to actively participating by having sex with her instead of just masturbating, she accepted that change. When he began having sex with you too, her resentment grew. Over time, she felt like a third wheel. You and David were taking the spotlight. While you started each encounter with her, you ended up with him. She eventually realized it was all orchestrated between you and David. You both desired each other, and she unwittingly facilitated it. She fell for your story about reliving what you did in college. As time passed, she felt increasingly left out. She has turned against both you and David. You can read her statement for yourself. It's included in this envelope, I concluded, pushing the envelope closer to her before leaving the room. There was no room for negotiation. Reconciliation was out of the question. The demon on my shoulder and the voices in my head convinced my heart that my marriage was beyond salvaging. I wanted out, and I wanted out immediately. The divorce proceedings were straightforward. We divided our assets evenly, and there was no spousal support involved. With my share of the money, I purchased a condo near my workplace. Chapter 05. It took me quite some time to adjust to single life. I was learning to handle tasks that Alicia had always taken care of, such as grocery shopping. Finally, I knew exactly where the milk and beer were located in the store aisles. One day, fate intervened. I accidentally collided with Ramona in the cereal aisle. Her cart bumped mine, causing her milk to spill from its perch on the front of her cart, creating a mess on the floor. God damn it! What else can go wrong? Do you ever watch where you're going, you son of a bitch? She exclaimed angrily. I recognized her immediately, and she recognized me at the same moment. I started to apologize when she abruptly interrupted herself. Oh, shit. It's you. I'm so sorry for my language. I'm having a really rough day. It feels like forever since I've had a good one. It's no excuse, and I'm truly sorry for taking it out on you. I'm not worth much anymore. Tears streamed down her face. I retrieved the milk from my cart and placed it in hers. She bowed her head and began to cry in earnest. In an attempt to console her, I put my arm around her. She rested her head on my shoulder, and the tears flowed freely. All eyes in the aisle were on us. I gently patted her arm and said, "I'll cover the cost of your groceries today, Ramona. It's the least I can do to make up for my clumsiness. My mind has been elsewhere ever since the divorce." Her tears began to subside, and she said, "I think I'm done for the day. I can't handle any more. I'm sorry I snapped at you. It was my fault as much as yours. My mind has been elsewhere lately. It always is nowadays." With that, she abandoned her cart in the middle of the aisle and headed towards the parking lot. I pushed both our carts to the checkout, paid for everything, and loaded them into my truck. Instead of heading home, I found myself driving towards the house where my marriage had unraveled. I transferred Ramona's groceries into a portable cart and brought them to her door. A young woman answered. Surprised but composed, I said, "I have groceries for Ramona Jefferson." She replied, "The Jeffersons don't live here anymore. We bought this house from them. Ramona couldn't afford to keep it after their divorce." "Could you tell me where she lives now?" I inquired. She mentioned that Ramona was staying with her mother at the mobile home manor. "I believe they're in Unit 28, but I'm not completely certain," she added. I thanked her and returned the cart to my truck. I managed to find Ramona's mother's trailer. She recognized me and invited me inside. I was taken aback by the squalid and run-down condition of the place. She mentioned that Ramona was out at the grocery store. I explained the situation and told her about the groceries I had in my truck for Ramona. Together, we put them away in the refrigerator. After we finished, she commented, "Ramona's probably at Kelly's bar. She spends too much time there. If she doesn't straighten up, she might lose her job." Her revelation that David was living with my ex-wife in an apartment in the nearby city caught me off guard. But why should it have? Deciding to check on Ramona, I drove over to Kelly's bar, where I found her exactly as predicted, sitting at a table towards the back. Her head was buried in her arms, resting between two empty beer mugs. I sat down across from her and said, "Hi again. Can I get you another beer?" She lifted her head abruptly, recognizing me. "Damn it, Frank. I'm sorry." "What do you want?" she replied, sounding exasperated. Had she already forgotten our encounter at the store? How bad was she? "Ramona, I just came from your mom's place. We put your groceries away in the fridge. What are you doing here? Drinking your dinner? They have decent food here. Let me get you something more substantial." "Are you telling me you bought the groceries I left in the cart?" she asked incredulously. "That's exactly what I did." "Why would you do that?" "I didn't want you to do that." "Because I felt like it. You've had a rough day, or maybe I should say, you're having a rough time. I've had plenty of those myself lately, and I know how it feels. Plus, I just found out from your mom that my ex and your ex are shacking up together in the city. Doesn't that make us related in some weird way?" I grinned, trying to lighten the mood. She said, "I don't know about that, but I would like to talk to you about everything that happened sometime when you're available." I replied, "I'm available now." Let's order a couple of steaks and talk while we eat. She chuckled. If we're having steak together, that makes it a date. And if it's our first date, I don't want it to be in this rotten place. Let's make it a memory we'll cherish when we're old and gray. Do you really want our first date to happen in this shitty place? Her grin was a welcome sight. I was glad to see her familiar humor returning. You pick the place, and I'll foot the bill. How's that for a first date? I offered. She pondered for a moment. Are you a member of the country club? I shook my head. Do I look like a country club member? Laughing, she replied, I have no idea. I've never been there. How about Raymond's Steakhouse? Extending my arm, I joked, yes ma'am, Raymond's it is, and off we went. The steaks were satisfying, but the conversation was even better. Ramona shared her belief that everything leading up to the sexual involvement between our spouses had been meticulously planned. She explained, it all started with Alicia wanting to revive our college-era girl-on-girl relationship. I was open to the idea because my relationship with David was deteriorating. He became distant, rough, and sometimes abusive. Reconnecting with Alicia brought some excitement, and soon things heated up between us in the house I shared with her former boyfriend, who had become my husband. Then David conveniently walked in on us one day, unannounced. His condition for not exposing us was being allowed to watch. Unable to contain himself, he began masturbating while observing. Eventually, watching turned into participation. It began with him and me, and later he started fooling around with Alicia. Soon enough, it escalated to full-on unprotected sex. David never used condoms. He claimed they didn't do it for him. Ultimately, Alicia and I unwittingly kicked off a carefully orchestrated affair while I played the role of an observer in my own marriage. In hindsight, it was a well-thought-out scheme. When I finally saw the truth, I was furious at both of them and myself. I nodded in understanding. I agree with everything you've said, except for the fatted calf part. You lost me there. She asked, did you ever go to Sunday school? Haven't you heard about the guy who had a bad son and a good son? The good one stayed home and helped his dad with the farm. The bad son took his inheritance and went away to bad places where he drank too much liquor and knew in the biblical sense too many women. After some time went by, the bad son was broke, so he came back home. When that errant son got home, his dad told the servants that he wanted to have a big party to celebrate his son's return. He told them to kill the fatted calf so they would have some outstandingly tender and delicious food to eat in celebration. When the son that had stayed home and helped with the farm heard what had happened, he was quite upset. When the father found out about it, he told his good son that it was appropriate to celebrate his bad son's return. He was lost, but now he's found, said the father. She said, I'm not sure of every word, but that's the gist of the story. Anyway, to explain my remark, I once read about a little girl who heard that story for the first time in Sunday school. The teacher asked the class if the story made them feel sorry for anyone. They each replied that they felt sorry for the good son who stayed and helped his dad but never got to have a party. They all agreed, except for one very precocious little girl. When it was her turn, she said that she felt sorry for the fatted calf. It was a funny but insightful answer. As she told the story, I recalled hearing it somewhere before, though not the part about the little girl's clever answer. It gave me a good chuckle. Taking Ramona's hand, I said, if you see me as the fatted calf in our story, I'm not quite sure what that means. I prefer to think of myself as the good son. Are you suggesting you feel sorry for me, or perhaps you want to throw a party for David? Ramona laughed this time. I do feel sorry for you. You've suffered a great deal due to something I was deeply involved in. I regret my part in making you the fatted calf or the good son. Either way, I contributed to your betrayal. I shook my head. Ramona, I don't see you as a contributor to my betrayal. I see you as a victim, just like me. It seems our spouses are living as if they're married, while we're left picking up the pieces. They're the ones having the party and enjoying the fatted calf, while we're left in tears. Changing the subject, I asked her about her emotional state at the grocery store. Was it all because I ran into your cart? She explained that it was the final straw. She was struggling to cope with everything that had unfolded. David had drained their joint bank accounts and the proceeds from selling their house were minimal. He had managed to arrange divorce papers through a questionable lawyer that left her with next to nothing. Without the funds to hire her own legal representation, she received little assistance from free services. To add to her troubles, she was now living with her mother and sleeping on the floor of her trailer. She went on to explain that despite David being supposed to send her money monthly, she hadn't received a penny. Despite her complaints, the agency hadn't been of any help. She said, "That's why I was upset. Spilling that milk was just the last straw. I'm sorry. None of it was your fault. I did run into your cart and caused the milk to spill, Ramona. It was probably as much my fault as yours. I just unloaded all my anger about everything onto you. I really am sorry." She continued, "My mom is more of a burden than a help. She means well, but she can't resist criticizing everything and blaming everyone except David. She always liked him and she's convinced it's all my fault that he left. Never mind that he stole your wife on his way out." As I drove her home that evening, we both agreed it had been the craziest first date ever. We felt like the wreckage left behind after the hurricane of lust our spouses had created had torn our lives apart. It was all part of their plan, and it worked. Following that, we had many more outings together. As time went on, we grew more comfortable with each other. Aside from a few kisses hello and goodbye, we hadn't taken things further. Then, during another evening of conversation over dinner at a place called The Den, I said, "I have a proposition for you, Ramona." She replied, "Frank, I'm just not ready to try marriage again. I think you and I could be very happy together, but I thought that about David, and it all went to hell. I can't put you or myself through that again. Can we take a bit more time to be sure?" I assured her I completely understood. My proposal isn't going to be a marriage proposal. I think we might get there someday, but for now, I'm suggesting you move in with me. I have 4 bedrooms for you to choose from. I think you might prefer living with me over staying with your mom. And there are no strings attached. I explained that I had arranged to start working from home and had a budget to hire a secretary. I'll double your current salary, and you can say goodbye to sleeping on the floor of your mom's trailer. She smiled and said, "I accept your proposal, Frank. How soon can we make this happen?" "Well, how long will it take you to get your things together?" 15 minutes. 30 at most. When do you want to do it? Is tonight too soon? Let's do it. And so we did. When I showed her the bedrooms to choose from, she asked which one I used. I told her I was in the master bedroom at the end of the hall. She hurried down there and opened the door. "Look at this huge bedroom and this king-sized bed with a canopy. The attached bathroom has both a tub and a walk-in shower. There are even his and her sinks. I choose this one." I said, "Ramona, this is where I sleep." She replied, "That's exactly why I want to be here. Everything else is wonderful, but I'd sleep on the floor again if it meant being with you." Chuckling, I warned her, "I can't promise to behave if you get into bed with me." With a mischievous grin, she assured me, "You won't hear a single complaint from me." "Welcome to our bedroom," I said. Ramona squealed with delight and kissed me passionately, more lovingly than ever before. Moments later, she said, "Frank, we matched perfectly in every way so far, but there's one aspect of compatibility we haven't explored yet, and it's at least a bit important." Over an hour later, somewhat breathlessly, I asked her if she thought we were completely compatible. She murmured, "Absolutely. Being with you feels like floating on a cloud. It's comfortable yet thrilling, with breathtaking scenery and indescribable emotions. The best part is how we share the experience, like we're one entity. We're so compatible, it's almost scary." She whispered, "Can we change the name of this room from your bedroom to our bedroom?" "Yes, indeed." "Let's celebrate," I agreed, "with a feast fit for a king." Epilogue. Ramona and I are about to celebrate our 20th anniversary. When we vowed to forsake all others, we meant both men and women. I wish I could say everything went perfectly smoothly during these years, but what I can say is that our marriage has been nearly flawless. Together, we welcomed a daughter into the world. We named her Mira, short for miracle. It was a challenging pregnancy, nearly miraculous that Mira is now a healthy and vibrant young lady. Sadly, Ramona can't have more children, but we're grateful for our miracle and for overcoming those dark times together. And Alicia and David? They never married and split up shortly after getting together. David's whereabouts are unknown, while Alicia has lived on the West Coast for many years. She never remarried, instead finding success as a writer with several bestsellers. She stays in touch with us occasionally. During Ramona's difficult pregnancy, Alicia visited. It was the first time in years I found myself alone with her in the hospital coffee shop. She mused aloud about how I discovered the truth about the suitcase. I told her it was because, for once in my life, I paid attention, like noticing the lipstick on her collar that fateful Wednesday. That discovery ultimately led to finding the evidence that broke my heart and ended our marriage. She apologized once more, maintaining that her initial intention was only to reconnect with Ramona. However, as things escalated, she admitted finding pleasure in her encounters with David, highlighting the stark contrast between his rough dominance and my loving gentleness. She described experiencing two vastly different sexual worlds simultaneously, which she found exhilarating while it lasted. She emphasized once more that upon my discovery of her affair with David, she chose to end it and commit fully to our relationship. For a time, everything returned to normal until the revelation of the suitcase, which shattered our marriage. Reflecting, I speculated that if I hadn't been observant that one crucial day, I might have lived my life blissfully unaware of her betrayal, existing in a dream world that suddenly turned into a nightmare. As she had brought up the suitcase, I pressed her to explain two lingering mysteries: why she had placed the incriminating items in the suitcase, and why she kept it. She offered no answers to either question, leaving me to wonder if she truly didn't know or simply chose not to disclose. In the grand scheme of things, these unanswered questions gnaw at my mind, though I acknowledge I've had a fulfilling life that I wouldn't trade for anything else. In truth, after she ceased her affair, our relationship had almost returned to its previous normalcy. Had she destroyed the evidence rather than keeping it, I likely would never have learned the full extent of her betrayal or even remembered her brief liaison with Ramona. Our marriage might have endured longer, thanks to my ignorance of the details she chose to retain in that suitcase. The logical step would have been to dispose of the incriminating evidence, yet she kept it, prompting me to speculate on deeper motives beyond her understanding. I've often wondered if subconsciously she wanted to be discovered, perhaps harboring a desire to be with David all along or seeking to inflict pain upon me or Ramona. Perhaps one day, someone will decipher the mystery and provide me with answers. I hope so, as there must be a resolution to these lingering questions. Despite my lingering curiosity, I find solace in the fact that Alicia's actions, puzzling as they may be, ultimately led to the happy outcome with Ramona and me. Yes, I'm grateful for how things turned out, yet the enigma of those two questions continues to haunt me. Thanks for watching and have a great day. Write your opinion in the comments.